Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. 1 minute and 49 seconds. What's on your mind? Is that a question or a statement? Yeah, we are what we think. What is consciousness? Any of those things. Oh, it's toasty in here.
Oh, you should
What?
go the other way. Yeah.
Klutz.
Oh,
Lutz and Klutz. Yeah, you were almost there.
yes. It's Lutz and Klutz. Klutz ice skating to know the Lutz.
You have to put the Klutz to get the Lutz.
That was fantastic. You guys are great. Nice job on these takeoffs.
Thank you, John. It'll be dark in here. We can go. Appreciate it, too. We'd love to do business with John, and we'd love to do the puzzles you throw our way, too. Send him an email to words@waverradio.org or spill them out on the telephone, 877-929-9673. Hello, you have a way with words.
Hey, Dad. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Dave. What's on your mind?
Hi, Dave. What's on your mind? Oh, see, they're talking about what's on your mind. And there's, my sister was telling me in New Jersey, near New York City, they're flower gardeners, and that they found this residue from a spring air that was the, what do you call it? The smoke from the Canadian fires, which were more than 1,000 miles away. Now, if anyone knows anything about fires, you have a fire, it consumes the fuel, normally something that is high in carbon, a tree, a house, even, a coal-fired power plant, right? And that smoke goes up in the air, and it's being carried by the heat of the fire, right? Depending on how hot that heat is how high that particulate matter kind of rises. Also, one of the contributing factors of how high it goes is what that particulate matter is and how much it weighs and how large it is. And mostly when a forest burns or a house burns or coal burns in a power plant or a steel mill furnace, that particulate is somewhat large, somewhat heavy. Right? So the particulate matter that was carried from Canada to New York City had to be extremely fine, on the level of microns of dust, of less than dust. Dust would have been too heavy. So how do you get carbon, which normally is a relatively crass burning molecule that is heavy in residue, and that residue is not only heavy in amount, but also weight and size? Most forest fires, the smoke travels no more than 100 miles, if that, and then falls back to earth. Most fires, the residue falls within 5-10 miles, because the residue has to get quite high up in the air, up above 20,000 feet to go any distance, right? So if your fire is only burning like a house, that's, very limited and very, maybe 300 to 400 degrees, maybe 600 degrees at highest, if it's something volatile. A forest itself doesn't burn that hot. I mean, to a person standing near the fire, 300 degrees is pretty toasty. But for that particulate matter to go up in the air to travel thousands of miles, that fire has to be burning at something close to 1,200 degrees, right? So those Canadian fires had to be burning at 1,200 degrees. And it's interesting that we don't really get to see too many images of those fires. The ones we do, or I have seen, have been ones that were either from satellite or from airplanes that were still relatively high. And both show the fires burning in a straight line of great distance, like, instead of like a mile or two, 50 to 100 miles long, in a straight line, not, square area burning. And that the fires, once have burned, the fire was so hot and the fuel consumed completely. It didn't, have hot spots and burning, and pretty much the fires went out, which were indicative of the same kind of fires that burned in California 3 and 4 years ago, or about 10, a period of fires were in California for about 10 years, right? And it'll be interesting to see what kind of fires we get this fire season when things get dried out, because we've had a very, very, very wet spring and early summer and winter. So it'll be interesting. So all of this stuff seems to have more to do with certain natural patterns than, us, our tailpipe of our car causing greenhouse effects that are increasing the heat. But the fires themselves seem very man-made, something similar to a space-based energy weapon. And someone used the term, because the person who seemingly has the finances and wherewithal, and also a special interest in this, is Mr. Rothschild, who owns most of America's utility companies. And he has been gathering utilities since World War II, and in a very, very, very increased way since Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton controlled virtually everything in America. Bill Clinton did more, political damage to the United States than there are 3 presidents who've done more, who have done similar damage. Woodrow Wilson, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton. These are the most damaging presidents. Woodrow Wilson. Well, let's go back further. Good old Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson, Harry S. Truman, Jimmy Carter, good old Mr. George H. Bush, Dick Cheney and George W. Bush, and good old Obama, and used car salesman Stafford Biden. And it's interesting to, objectively look at Carrot Head and see that he, both Biden and Obama did more ruthless things to the immigration of people in America than Carrot Head. Did more damage, environmentally, especially Joe Biden, who's tried to prep himself through the, Inflation Reduction Act as a great environmentalist, but he's increased drilling in Alaska and in very sensitive areas, and he has okayed the completion of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. So you have to step back and look at what's going on, and it's pretty obvious. One or two things are going to happen. I think, Donald Trump will easily get the Republican nomination, and I would say that he is either going to bring in John Kennedy III, no, Robert Kennedy III, or Tucker Frederickson as his vice presidents, right? And they will win, right? And basically, Donnie is sick. He's overweight. He's had COVID. I would say he's going to be morte in office very early on. And whoever the vice president, either Tucker Jackson or Kennedy, will become president. And Elon Musk will become either Attorney General or a Supreme Court judge or Secretary of State. And we will go, and then there will be a semi, by that time, the war in Ukraine and Russia will escalate into a total NATO war. There will be an exchange of nuclear weapons. And Western Europe will be basically devastated into, not all of it, but spheres will be turned back to what it was just after World War II. Russia itself will suffer the worst calamities. Well, the worst calamities will be in Ukraine. There will be no Ukrainians left. Right? We will, because this war will be fought before it goes nuclear for at least another year, if not two, which will be basically a stalemate. But the Ukrainians will get the worst of the, because Ukrainians, their country is being obliterated by constant bombing, and Russia is just getting a few little hits here and there. If we give the long-range artillery shells, the ATACMS, and the small diameter shells, which are long-range artillery shells, extremely, you can hit something like a hubcap 600 miles away, and they will go after the Crimea in a serious way. And I would say they will do that relatively soon. Before fall happens, they will get these weapons, and they only need about 600 of each for them to decimate the Russian Navy in the Black Sea and take out all of the transportation into the Crimea, and get rid of all of the ability to grow food in Crimea, and get rid of all of the warehouses of strategic war materials that are needed at this moment to supply the troops, the Russian troops on the line. Now, the Russians over this winter have built quite a fortification of concrete abutments, minefields, and very, very sturdy and deeply dug trench warfare, right? So it's hard to attack that. And Ukraine has already tried. They kind of lost more than 10, maybe 20, somewhere between 20 and 10 of the German Leopard tanks, which is a very good tank. But basically what happened is they ran into a minefield, right? They were allowed to go into a trap. The mines were turned on. They couldn't get out. That's what happened. That tank really is designed to have a tank battle out into the big fields of the Ukraine and Russia, not in small hedgerows, which is where where the Russians have put their defensive places in Ukraine. For about 800 miles long. But there are a number of weak spots that the Ukraine could, they have about 100,000 of well-trained and well-armed troops that they can force into some kind of endeavor. And the Ukrainians will fight as long as NATO and America keeps giving them weapons. And the United States and NATO is building a database on how Russia fights a war. And so once NATO comes into it, it'll be a short thing, right? Because Russia has already been depleted a great deal and will be depleted even more. By that time, Crimea will not per se be taken over, but made useless, and no one will want to live there. It'll no longer be the pretty place on the Baltic Sea that the Russians like to take their holidays in. So this is what my little crystal ball is telling me. And this presidential election could very easily create a rupture of the United States, right, where we separate, right? It would be the East Coast that kind of, it takes the East Coast of Canada, and there's the West Coast that takes Mexico, and we have two new countries, somewhat aligned because we are all North America. It'll be based on NAFTA, and that we kind of need each other for resources and manufacturing, but ideologically it'll be a rupture and done on purpose to weaken America's, because when America pulls together, it can do amazing things. And if you separate them into these three different ideological zones, Eastern United States and Eastern Canada, the rest of Canada, and then Mexico and Western United States. That will be a basically EU of America, but in ideological differences. And there will be enough of that rebranding that it will add a vibrance to it that for the next 20 or so years, the United States will or the EU, or no, the American Union, or AU, whatever you want to call it, will become the dominant, but not unipolar, right? Because the unipolar is Hail Hydra, and that will still stay semi in the background, right? But still control everything as it does today. Just go watch Stan Lee's Marvel Captain America movies. It's very, very enlightening. So are the X-Men, right? And so what else can we say? It's interesting. There are a lot of other YouTube sites that there's that guy, what's his name, in England, and he is what's his name? It's an English guy. He's bald. He's got glasses. He's kind of a cheeky monkey. Oh, here he is. What's his name?
I'd like to thank the lovely people of Qstoke for hosting me last night when I went down near Weston-super-Mare to give a nice talk to all these wonderful awake people. And apart from feeding me butcher's faggots and talking like that down there in the West Country, we had a lovely time. So thank you so much to
Richard
all of
V.
those. Meanwhile, back to the monologue. And have you noticed, it's very interesting, isn't it, that we've seen these fires. Oh my goodness, the planet is warming up. We've seen these fires. I've been a bit slow to the party on this one because I don't have mainstream media pumped into my house, warping my brain and convincing me that man-made global warming has caused these fires in Greece. Because if I had, I would have seen that BBC correspondent who was flown over, although apparently that was denied, although there are pictures of him coming back with the tags, the airport tags dangling from his backpack. But yes, there he was over there in some of the islands in Greece going, man-made global warming has warmed all this up, these fires. Because luckily, having my head above the parapet here on YouTube, people get in touch with me and they say, Richard, have you seen all this nonsense about the fires? I live in Greece. I live on these islands. This is all done by arsons. We have this every time. There's all these olive groves. And olive, think of it, olive oil. It's probably heated up to the right temperature, very inflammable. And yes, it's arsonists who are doing this, not man-made global warming. But they do like that narrative. So there's things that they want to talk about, and then there's, of course, those things they don't want to talk about, like the many diverted aeroplanes at the moment. A friend of mine got in touch. He flies quite a bit, and he says, I keep seeing these diverted aeroplanes. Why would an aeroplane divert from its destination? Well, of course, there's usually two reasons. One would be mechanical failure, and the other would be probably a medical problem on board with somebody in the aeroplane, naturally. And so you'd have to divert to the nearest place so you can offload that passenger and they can get to a hospital. And they said it's very unusual because it's not often it's a mechanical problem, because obviously aeroplanes are looked after incredibly well, all these checks. So there might be a few, but he said in increasingly the last couple of years, specifically at the moment, there seems to be diversions left, right and centre. And so he says he wonders, could you put the dots together and wonder what happened perhaps a couple of years ago that might affect people maybe at a certain height, that sort of brings on a certain condition, I don't know, with perhaps a medical intervention that they've had, which gives maybe problems.
Well, that's Richard. Anyway, same as it ever was. Who knows?